Hello and welcome to the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing, with me, Mike Dixon, Director of AXR Recruitment and Search. Now, our purpose at AXR is to help you make a great career decision. And in the podcast today, we have another star in our extensive lineup of female sales directors who will share her journey and give you some insights you just cannot get anywhere else. So welcome to the pod, Claire Waite, Sales Director of Abella. Claire, how are you?
Good, thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you and really looking forward to getting to your journey today. Now, for regular listeners, we know we start with a couple of standard questions just to kind of get a sense of who you are, Claire. The first one is about your favourite brand. And as always, the caveat is you can't pick Abella.
Okay, that is very hard. I guess there's probably many brands or parts of brands that I really like, Mike. And I guess also when you think about brands, there's always things that, maybe there's opportunity for improvement. But focusing on the positive, I'd say the brand I'd call out today is Lorna Jane Activewear. And the reason why I'd call out Lorna Jane Activewear is I think mostly around the story and the evolution of the business. For me, I think it's just a fabulous story. I think, as I understand it, it's Lorna Jane first worked on her very first piece of activewear back in 1989. And she was almost like a pioneer within the fashion industry because she challenged fashion convention at the time to recognise a new category that simply didn't exist, which I guess today has, become what's known as activewear. And I also really like the brand because of its mission and the modern day connection of the mission to sustainability. So I think it's a really fabulous brand that for over 34 years has remained relevant. So, yeah,
Great
that
choice.
would be my brand.
Great choice. My daughter works for Lululemon, so she'll probably not like that answer, if I'm honest, Claire. But I know the story, and it's a really good one. Yeah, really good one. Cool. So before we dig into your career, just give us a bit of the background before you started out in I guess the pathway to becoming a sales director. But winding right back, where are you from? A bit about your background.
Yeah, I grew up in a small country town in the Riverina in central New South Wales. And I'd say a lot of my passion and interest in the FMCG industry has come from that background and that childhood. And, being surrounded by farming communities and seeing the impact on FMCG businesses to those local communities was a big thing for me. And I'd also say it might even be to do with the fact that I've got an Italian heritage. And so my mother and my nonna were a huge influence with me on food in particular, but not just food from a food creation point of view, but around food as a connector of people, and shared experiences. So I think that's probably a little bit of the early influence as to why I've been so interested and passionate about the FMCG industry. I'd also say that I've always been interested in business, and as a kid, whether it was doing the pamphlet run or collecting cans for money or literally I think it was 14 and 9 months to the very day I became a checkout chick at Big W. So for me, it was very much an interest on going to university and doing something related to business.
Yeah.
So, like many universities, a catalyst for moves. So off I went to Wollongong and post that Sydney. So I guess that's a little bit about my history.
The pathway to Sydney.
Yeah, that's right.
I love the entrepreneurial Claire Waite selling cans I did a lot of that as a kid as well. Yeah. Making sort of back in Scotland, £5 here and £10 there, thinking I was really rich.
I had the whole family onto it. It was a bit of a family business. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, let's get into your career. So uni at Wollongong and post uni you landed in a grad program with George Weston Foods in 2004. Now, grad programs are a great way to kick off your career. Now, you mentioned you had a kind of I guess, a passion or a knowledge of FMCG from the Riverina. Was that then very much the conscious choice? If I could get into a grad program in an FMCG business, that was the number one goal?
It was very much a conscious choice, especially given that history that I've shared. I was always interested in FMCG businesses and the brands that work within.
Yeah, great. And I kind of always interested when I look at people's early career and I track very carefully grads today because my role obviously is just to recruit talent for you and other businesses. We're often in this talent shop market, and a lot of that's because graduates are often doing lots of different things now, and there's very few grad programs. I think FMCG grad programs are not as prevalent as they used to be. So we're seeing this kind of slight dearth of talent coming through year after year. But do you think they're still relevant today, and should we be doing more with grad programs?
I think they can be really relevant. I would have to say I acknowledge that it's not the only way. I think there's many pathways to get those early experiences in your career. Having said that, I think they can actually be really, really relevant, but it has to come down to what the business and the individual wants to get out of it. If I reflect on my personal experience, I was with the George Weston Foods graduate program a few years ago, and it was a really structured program where I got to work across various different commercial functions from sales, marketing, and commercial finance. And in those experiences within that rotational structure, I was able to work on projects in my own right, but also tap into leaders and mentors within each of those functions. So it was a really great experience for me and actually enabled me to really think about what pathway I wanted to take my career. Like I said, I always knew I wanted a career in business, but I wasn't 100% certain what pathway that would be. And that opportunity just, for me, solidified which way I wanted to go. So it was a great experience. But I'd have to say, it really does come down to what you want to get out of it, and you need to be quite purposeful behind the choices that you make. And I think for businesses, and it's almost the challenge for businesses with graduate programs, I think is that they've got to be able to create the space for teams and leaders to provide that mentorship and to be able to offer meaningful work for the graduate. And then, of course, have an opportunity for the graduates post the program. But if you can do that within the business, you've got a great mechanism to attract top talent.
Yeah. I think often the excuse or the reason employers give for not investing more in grad programs is they train these grads up over 2 years and they move on and they feel, was that an ROI for us or not? But because you left after about 2.5 years to go to Sara Lee, was that just the right move for you at the time, or was that an example of a grad program that didn't bear fruit for George Weston Foods?
Yeah, I loved my experience at George Weston Foods. And after the graduate program, like I said, I was pretty clear about what pathway I wanted to take, and it was definitely sales for me. And then opportunity opened up within the sales team, with the Woolworths sales team at the time, as an integrated supply planner role. So that was the role I chose to take. And I also thought it would be great because, again, it would build out some experiences for myself as well, along that path to purchase. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity. And then I guess whilst I was doing that role, I got approached on the Sara Lee role. At that time, it was Sara Lee Coffee and Baking Division. And it was an opportunity as an assistant business manager for Coles. And I guess it was that step closer to that goal. So, and additionally, I love Moccona coffee and Sara Lee dessert. So it seemed like a really good choice for myself.
Great. Well, as we were chatting before the session, we just picked up Sara Lee as a client, so come full circle. But they're like they describe themselves now as like a 50-year-old heritage brand, but as a new startup, because it's so they're kind of doing it all again differently within bakery, obviously, and not bakery, but desserts and ice cream. So interesting to see how that business goes. But your journey when you were that big, a different Sara Lee at a different time was pretty smooth. You did step through quite quickly to national business manager. It seemed quite seamless. Was it a kind of smooth a path as it looks on your resume?
It was a great experience. I'm very grateful for my time with the business, with the Sara Lee, and then later with the JDE Peets, the Moccona side of the business. Whilst I was there, I had the opportunity to work across the full spectrum of Australian grocery retailing. So I was working on Coles, Woolworths, independents, and some of the global customers as well. So for me, that breadth of retail experience that I gained whilst I was there was extremely valuable. And it also gave me the opportunity to navigate through opportunities and challenges. And I had the time whilst I was there to have those experiences. And it's often something that I talk about with my team, the importance of working through business cycles. I often talk about that, the first phase is you're executing someone else's plan. The second phase is you're developing your own plan and executing it. And then the third phase is you're handing over the program to someone else to execute. But all the way through those phases, you're actually building skills and experiences. So for me, I absolutely loved my time there. And the other reason I would say that it was that seamless progression in terms of my career was down to the culture and the people. At the time, the managing director, Lara Brands, and Alan Dowsett, the sales director, and my line manager, Nigel Meltzer, just really created that supportive culture and really empowered me to operate at my best. And I think that, that people and culture side of things was also absolutely pivotal for me throughout my time there.
I really like how you described the business cycle there, Claire. Too often, I think people skip through roles quickly, and I get that. There's drive and ambition, but often you don't really spend enough time to make an impact.
Yeah,
you're just executing somebody else's plan, as you say, and not really creating your own legacy within that customer. But so I think a piece of advice for the listeners for sure is it fine. In fact, it's really good to spend 2 or 3 years in a role, as opposed to thinking after 12 months, what's my next job?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, cool. You then spent about just over a year or so, 14, 15 months with Goodman Fielder. And before, I think your career-defining move, which was to Abella. Now, going back to that time, why Abella? But for those who probably know Abella now as a leading brand in hummus and dips and spreads, but in I guess 2012, it'd be a very different business. So talk us through your decision and what you're walking into.
Yeah. For those that are on the call that may not be aware of Obella, so Obella is a PepsiCo and Strauss joint venture. So locally we manufacture Red Rock Deli dips, Copper Pot dips, and of course the Obella dips, where we do a variety of dips and hummus-based dips. So if you're ever in the supermarket, the Obella dips are the ones with the red lids. Sorry, Mike, I can't help myself.
It's good branding.
But going back to Obella in 2012, it was the way I described the business at that time was it was 6 Red Rock Deli SKUs, a small office space, and half a dozen people tasked with building and creating a company. And at that time, it was a heavy, it comes with, starting up a business. It's a heavy lift as you're building and creating. But what also was ever present at that time was such a presence of purpose and camaraderie. And I think a lot of it comes down to our startup general manager, Chris Elliott. He's not only, I guess, a smart strategic thinker, but he had such clarity of vision and direction and really, unified us all around that, culture of camaraderie and empowerment.
Mm. 6 people in a room literally trying to make this business work with 6 SKUs. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. You
At
come out,
one point, it was 3 people in one office, and
Was it really?
that was a bit hectic.
Why did you join? You were in kind of pretty much large tier one,
Yeah.
gathering all these amazing experiences.
Yeah.
You know, a bit of a step change.
Yeah, I definitely had a pros and cons list. And to your point, I was with Goodman Fielder, and I was really enjoying my time at that business and working across multiple categories and in large frameworks and influencing within. And it very much, I guess, came down to the fact that I was so motivated behind the purpose of the business with Obella. And back then and now, the purpose is very similar. The purpose is to unite and delight the world around planet positive food. And, you know, we do all base formats of dips, but at the core of what we do is hummus. And it's an incredible universal food. And I could talk for hours, Mike, about hummus. I feel like I'm a walking billboard. But that really meant a lot to me, that the purpose of what we were trying to do and the ambition and mission for the business. That was a big part of it. The other was to be a founding member, to build out a commercial and customer, function and direction for a business was something that really excited me. And the fact that it was a joint venture with 2 global giants in PepsiCo and Strauss, with this gift of a startup opportunity, for me it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So the pros definitely outweigh the cons.
Yeah. I like the way you thought it through. We deal with AXR, as you know, Claire, some of the biggest tier ones, but we deal with some of the kind of really interesting mid-tier businesses where your business is probably at now, still rapid growth, and also startups or early stage businesses. We love working with those. Often can be challenging persuading someone to join because there's a lot of risk with that. They don't always work out. But I think if you go through the pros and cons properly and speak to your recruiter really thoroughly, then you can make an informed decision. Looking at your early goals, so for those who are thinking, well, what's the mindset? What are you focusing on when you've got not much there? What were you trying to set up? Was it everything or was there an overarching goal? What were you trying to do?
Yeah, I was initially brought in to build the go-to-market plan for the Australian business from, I guess, early startup to scale up.
Fairly big task.
Yes, and with that comes the task of building, systems, procedures, etc. for the sales function. I would say that the first goal, however, was very much around accelerating the growth of the Red Rock Dips brand, but also to work with our customers, our retail partners, to really showcase the category growth potential or that white space opportunity that the Obella brand and business could bring to the category.
Okay. Now, we mentioned that was 11 years ago. Fast forward to now, established business, market leader, category creator in many respects, which is fantastic. So huge congratulations to Chris, who led the business in that journey, and to you, as you said, one of the founding members of that journey. But your career has progressed. You're now sales director of that business. What's kept you there through that 11 years?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this one, and I'd have to say it's been the personal growth as the maturity of the business has grown has been a big part of it for myself. In many ways, it feels like it's been different businesses over the years because we've gone through such transformational change, whether it be launching in a new category, building out an away from home food service channel, building out e-commerce or launching in a new market in New Zealand like we did. There was always something really quite transformational. And so with that comes a constant state of learning and never feeling comfortable. So I think for me, that's been a big part of it, plus also the people. That culture of empowerment and camaraderie is a big part of it. So I think that for myself and my personal journey, that's why I guess I'm still at Obella.
Yeah. And the journey is not smooth, right? Because whilst it looks amazing from the outside in, there's I guess every business that's growing over time is going to try stuff. Some works, some doesn't. But would you, if you had a chance to go back and unpick something or change something you did, what would you do?
There were certainly mistakes, but I don't know whether I'd say in hindsight I would have done anything differently, because you learn from those challenges, and those learnings lead to future successes because you've had that learning. So would I have done anything differently? Probably not.
Yeah. I think that's the right mindset, honestly. I think too often, if you are worried about the impact of what you're going to do, you don't do it and you procrastinate. I think you've got to make the best decisions you can in the moment with everything that's at your disposal, and commit and do it. Right, whether it's in business or in life or in your career, I completely agree with that mindset. Cool. So, what's next for Abella? Where does Abella go, and how do you keep challenging yourself as a business, as a market leader?
Yeah, I think we're always looking for ways to evolve, keep ourselves relevant for our customers, our consumers and our people. And we've actually got a new GM in Nick Carr. So I think it's really exciting times ahead for Abella.
Great. So watch this space, more to come.
That's right.
Different products, expansion, MPD, innovation.
All of the above.
All the above, yeah. Okay, well, I won't draw you on that, but cool. I want to spend a bit of time getting into your role. And part of the purpose of this is to really reveal to future leaders who are looking at you thinking, wow, inspirational journey, really impressed. Could I do what Claire does now as a sales director? And they may look at their own sales director and think, gosh, you spend a lot of time in meetings. I don't know what they do. So this is a big question, but could you just summarize a typical week as a sales director? What the nuts and bolts are of your job?
Yeah, I think what I love about what I do is no week is ever the same. I would say there's probably a couple of core fundamentals that apply for many sales directors, and a lot of those in any typical week can be linked back to key metrics, revenue, profit, share, et cetera. But what I'm focused on a typical week is the things, or the decisions that we make in the short term, whether it be daily, weekly, whatever. I ask myself, how does that ladder up to the longer term plan? And when I'm thinking about longer term planning in a typical week, I'm thinking about customers, consumers, businesses, and our people, and our care for our people. And I guess that can manifest in many different ways over a typical week.
And so does that mean lots of meetings, or do you get thinking time?
There are lots of meetings. I think the importance of thinking time is critical. So one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is making sure that I have that time in the calendar before meetings so I can plan them out.
It is an interesting concept, isn't it? I think we get very caught in the moment in any of our roles, and the bigger the role, the busier you are, and the more demands on your time. But the temptation is to react from moment to moment, because you've got the experience to probably make good decisions as you go. But you have got the strategic objective, which is, you're trying to grow a business. You're responsible for the long-term plan as well as the day-to-day execution. So how do you kind of lean into that strategic side of your role, Claire?
I think you always have to have an eye on that longer term objective in whatever decision you're making, whether it be, a strategy, initiative, execution. You've always got to ask yourself the question, how does this ladder up to the longer term plan?
So it's just being clear on what that longer term plan is, and just making sure there's always a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. I also want to talk about the role of sales, because it has evolved, I think, a lot. And the fact we're actually able to very regularly bring on female sales directors into the podcast, I don't think we'd be able to do that as easily 10 years ago. So part of me thinks that the role has evolved, that actually creates possibly the need for more diverse experience and individuals to come in and do the role. But in your experience, what do you think, if we look forward, the future of sales looks like?
For me, I would say that the future of sales, excuse me, is very much going to be a data-rich world. And I think it's only going to be amplified through e-commerce. And so I think for future or aspiring sales leaders, that capability to be able to navigate through data and various forms of data and to use that carefully to support sales stories or key hypothesis, I think will become increasingly important. I would also say having breadth of experience because of sales and it as a function, it has multiple touch points across the organisation. I think if you can get that early experience from other functions is an absolute asset to have. And I guess lastly, I would say I think there is a natural blurring of those traditional lines between sales, marketing, and even commercial finance. And I think it will become more important for teams to be able to co-create and work together as teams. And so I think, that will become increasingly important. So I think being able to get that real good balance with being able to navigate through data and work and co-create with teams cross-functionally will be really important.
Yeah, the whole data thing is the basis of that. I think it's often surprising for those outside of sales to understand how much being savvy with data, being comfortable with analytical capability to build business cases that are really commercially, financially sound surprises individuals. We have a accounting and finance business at AXR, and we often tease them that actually if you were to put a CFO up and present to a room of people, the biggest challenge they're going to get is from the sales director or the sales lead in that room. They're the one who's going to understand the numbers as well as they do and really dig in deep and because that's part of the role now. I think it's absolutely fundamental. Your second point on co-creation, I think, is really cool too. And I think co-creation is really powerful if you see the world from other perspectives too, not just yours. So spending time getting to know other functions, how they operate, working in other functions if you can, but getting involved in any cross-functional projects that enable you to co-create is going to be super powerful as you then step through your career to more senior roles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what about you as a leader? You've we've talked about your role and your pathway to that role, but describe yourself, or just perhaps rephrase that question. How would others describe you as a leader?
I think they would say that I'm a leader who motivates with energy and passion towards business outcomes. And I always look with the lens of how something is possible, progress being possible. I guess that abundance mindset.
And have you changed as a leader because of your experience with Abella? If you'd stayed in large tier one, do you think you'd be a different sort of leader now?
I don't think so. And the reason why I would say that is essentially Obella is a joint venture of two large corporates in PepsiCo and Strauss. And so in many respects, you get some really nice fundamentals and frameworks from those businesses. On the flip side to that, I think the Obella business has actually given me whole business thinking and a greater understanding of whole business working. So in many ways, I think I'm very fortunate to have had the Obella experience because of that fact. And I think it's actually accelerated my personal growth and development as a leader.
One of the things I talk a lot to with people who are on the cusp of your type of role, Claire. So they're looking at an ELT role, running a business, and they're perhaps in a senior functional role, not running a function just yet. Is that shift from functional thinking to enterprise thinking? And what you described there, being in Abella, has perhaps given you earlier in your career that opportunity to see how the whole business works. Whereas if you'd stayed in a large tier one, you do get a little bit siloed in my experience. And so somebody who's perhaps stepped out their tier one career and jumped into a smaller business, they can easily go back to tier one. But what they lock in with that small company experience is actually the understanding of how the whole business operates and the fact that your role matters and your role counts and there's no hiding. And if you have a bad month, bad year, the business probably has a bad month, bad year with you. So I think that exposure and responsibility is really cool, and you can't underestimate that. I think that's really important. I'm going to ask you a bit of a kind of fantasy question now. If you could pick anybody in the world that you'd love to work for, somebody you think, wow, their style, that type of person, that would be fun. Could be, business, politics, sport, celebrity, anybody. Who would it be?
It's the person who is my go-to person. So at dinner parties, if I talk about who I'd love to work for, this particular person comes up. I am very conscious that she was mentioned in a very recent podcast, but given that she is my go-to, the person that I would love to work for, or wish I could have worked for, would be Indra Nooyi from the former PepsiCo CEO. And the reason why I refer to her is I've had the benefit of meeting her a couple of times. Once when she came out to Australia to see the PepsiCo team, she spent some time with the Obella team. And the second time was when I was in the US for the Ring of Honor. And both times when I spoke to her, I was left with an absolute imprint. Not only is she such an impressive lady with an incredible strategic mind, but she's also extremely approachable, authentic and kind. And the conversations that I had really surprised me with her, because she was incredibly aware of what we were doing in Australia. This lady running this incredible business, this global business, was aware of what we were doing in Australia and the connection back to the broader PepsiCo vision for healthier, better for you snacking. And she really validated the work that we were doing and why it mattered. And it was never about her, it was about the mission. And so for me, if I think back on amazing leaders that I'd love to work for, that she'd be it for me.
Yeah. Sue Temple mentioned her as well. For those of you who haven't listened to Sue's episode, I think it was out a couple of weeks ago, but it's interesting. I love how you describe that connection to purpose. Modern leadership is connection to purpose. If you feel that the purpose is clear, it means something to you, and your role contributes meaningfully to that, then you've got something very powerful. Yeah. And if she can do that, at her level, with everyone she meets, and she must be pretty impressive. I must send her links. She knows who we are, not. Well, she knows who you are, and so Sue is. So I'll maybe ask you guys to send her the links. But that's great, really cool. Now, we've really enjoyed working for you, Annabella, Claire, as a client. And in one of the areas I know that you look for, and you mentioned it before, is this abundance mindset when you're looking for talent. Explain what that means and why it's important to you.
Yeah, the abundance mindset is a belief that progress is possible, that you can take steps forward to your ultimate goal. There'll always be things that, there's why and things shouldn't happen because, and you may attempt something and it may not exactly go to plan. But with an abundance mindset, you think through alternative options. You seek out alternative views on how you can overcome those problems and pivot those problems, and you never give up. And so for me, I think as aspiring sales leaders, I think that's a really great mindset to have. Being, in our role, you can be faced with many challenges, but having that tenacity to have a plan A, B, C, etc., is really quite powerful.
And do you probe for that when you're assessing talent? Do you kind of you expect someone to be able to kind of demonstrate that in an interview?
I ask a lot of questions around key challenges that they've had, and I look for answers where they can describe what they have personally done or how they've worked with the team to overcome and pivot problems. And I look for positivity, accountability and ownership in those answers.
Right. So that's interesting. So positivity, accountability, ownership. So abundance mindset, if someone has it at their core, then you could probably work with them to develop that abundance mindset, I imagine.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think if as particularly as leaders, I think it's really important to hold up a mirror and to celebrate that positive behaviour. If you see someone working through scenarios and coming up with creative ways to solve problems, you need to celebrate that.
Yeah. So not just looking for the obvious path forward, but actually if you challenge yourself and look at it from a different angle, you may come back to the original idea, but you're thinking through things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I really like that. Cool. Now, moving towards the end of the conversation, Claire, these things do go very quickly. What, in terms of, again, giving advice to others coming through, are there kind of common mistakes you see people making? You think, oh, I wish you didn't do that, in terms of how you're going about your career, just to help people think again ahead of decisions they might have to make, goals they're setting. Anything you think is a common mistake you see?
I think all experiences can be really helpful in building your career. And honestly, I think the biggest mistake is not learning from your mistakes.
Yeah.
So I think if you do that, then I'm not exactly sure that it is actually a mistake, because it's an experience that you've learnt from.
Yeah. Speaking from personal experience?
Oh, there's a few. I can't think of any at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'll let you go on that one. Great. So I want to finish up just by asking you to kind of sum up nicely, if you can, 3 pieces of career advice you would give those who, again, listening to this, looking at you and your career and aspiring, and feeling inspired to do what you've done. What advice would you give them?
I would say build out skills and experiences, navigate highs and lows, give yourself that time to invest in navigating through those business cycles, and seek early in your career breadth of experience, whether it be role, business, industry, etc., because I think that's a real asset. The second I would say is approach every experience with an abundance mindset. And then the third would be think about all the leaders that have had a positive impact on your life, and think about what kind of leader you want to be. And when you're doing that, I would suggest don't wait till you are a people manager. Start now, because I think it's a skill that is incredibly important. And whatever leader you choose to be, make it authentically you. I think there's a saying, as it goes, you have to be yourself because everybody else is taken. So I think that's really important.
Fantastic, Claire. Really, really enjoyable conversation. Lots of insights there. I'm really glad we managed to explore that abundance mindset piece. I think there's really, I love the way you phrase it. There's lots of takeaways, I think, for our listeners in today's pod. And to me, that's one of the absolute highlights. So really, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It was awesome to be here.
Brilliant. And thanks to you guys for listening. Next on the pod is Katie Steele. Now, Katie is most recently sales director of Dyson, another superstar female sales leader like yourself, Claire, and we're going to deep dive more into her role and what the sales director role actually does. Now, if listening to Claire has inspired you to address your career goals, or you'd like input and talent planning for your own team, then do reach out to me and my team at AXR Recruitment and Search, as well as specialist expertise in sales, marketing, and category. We have everything you need, the salary guides, which are, there's a pod on them coming out actually, interview guides, market guides, all the tools that will help you, understand career pathways to how to scale your sales and marketing team. So who else and where else would you want to talk with? So thanks again, Claire. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
And for me, Mike Dixon, keep listening to our pod to help your future in sales and marketing.